So you're now ready to identify your bee. First you're going to need is your dissection scope. Then you're also going to need the bee. You can see that it is in a petri dish with Play-Doh, and so this is just going to help us maneuver the bee around to see different angles under the scope. So always hold the head of the pin and you can just kind of put it at whichever angle you need to see. You're also going to need to use your dichotomous key, and so we use this specific one the most. There are other ones in the drive and a digital version of the same one as well, but we're going to be using this key. You're also going to need to use a notebook, and so this is going to help you keep track of the steps you're on. So if there's ever a difficult step that you might feel iffy on, you can go back to that, but we'll talk more about that. And since we're not all bee experts, you're also going to need diagrams for these very specific parts. And then once you identify your bee, you will just use scissors, a pen, and a post-it note to make your label for the identification label. We will be identifying the bee using our dichotomous key. So we will be using the common bees of Western North America. You can use the physical copy that we have in the lab, or you can use the digital copy. It's the same exact thing. And we will be starting on page 342. And so this book basically is like a choose your own adventure. You will start on couplet or step 1, and each couplet or step will have two choices or like paths to go down. And so they'll each kind of describe each kind of characteristics, and then you will pick which corresponding thing kind of aligns with the bee that you have, and then you'll just keep continuing on until we reach a genus. All right, and so starting on couplet 1 on page 342, this step is going to ask us if our bee has scopal hairs on its leg or abdomen, or if it doesn't have any at all. And so these are just pollen collecting hairs. An example of scopal hairs is on the right here. We can see that both of these legs have hairs. Scopal hairs are going to be more dense, branched-like. You could see pollen on them as well. You can see on the right side, there are hairs, they're just not scopal hairs. And so this is the bee that we are identifying and that we've been using. You can see this hind leg right here. There are hairs evident. You can see also on the abdomen as well, there are hairs, but that does not mean that they are scopal hairs. And so these are not scopal hairs. We will now go to the couplet that says scopal hairs are not evident. And so now we're on step 2. And so now we are determining the sex of the bee. And so if your bee does have scopal hairs, that means that it is a female. In this case, our bee does not have scopal hairs, but it still doesn't mean that it's not a female, because parasitic bees, or the Hylaeus genus, they don't have scopal hairs at all. They do kind of a few different other things to collect pollen or not to collect pollen. And so those females don't have scopal hairs. But now we're going to sex our bee. We're going to count the antennal segments. And so this is counting the pedicel and the scape. So they're not doing the 10 and 11, they're doing the 13 and 12. And so we're going to count the antennal segments. So we're going to look at the head of the bee. This is kind of the easier way to determine the sex. And so this is a nice clear shot here, and we can just start counting. So we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So this is going to have 13, which means that it is a male. If your bee doesn't have antenna for some reason, or just very hard to kind of tell, you can also count the tergal segments. 7 tergal segments will be a male, and 6 will be a female, and the tergal segments are going to be on the abdomen. You can also use your diagrams as well to get familiar with a few of the parts. And so here we have 7 tergal segments as well, making it a male. And so now we'll go to couplet 58. So you might have to skip a few pages. Now we're going to be focusing on the wing. And so this is going to be asking about the submarginal cells. This is where the diagram really comes in handy. So we are going to see if there is one submarginal cell, or if there are 2 or 3. And so kind of the easiest way to find the submarginal cells is you just look at where the stigma is at. It's kind of that darkened spot on the wing, and the submarginal cells will be right under that. And so the first one's the closest to the body. This is going to be 1, 2, and then 3. So it does not have 1, and so it has 3, which we'll be moving on to that next step, which is couplet 59. On this step, we will be looking at the head again, and so we are gonna be looking at the antennal sockets, and we're gonna see if they're on the lower half of the face or on the mid to higher part of the face. And so these sockets are just, the antennal sockets are where the antenna just connects to the face. You can see right here. The best way to kind of go through this step is kind of draw an imaginary line in your head and kind of see where those antennal sockets are at. And so on this one, it kind of looks more in the middle area, but that's going to be middle to the higher part of the face. That's where those antennal sockets are located. If it was lower, it would be very evident and very close to the clypeus, which is another part of its face here. But this one's going to be kind of mid to high. All right, so now we're going to move to couplet 64. And so we're going to go back to the wing, and now it's determining if it's the 3 or 2 submarginal cells. We already saw that there were 3, but here's an example again. We have our marginal cell, and then our first submarginal cell, then our second, and then our third. So we have 3. And so we will be moving to couplet 65. This one can be a little difficult. We are going to stay on the wing, and we're going to look at the basal vein. And so we're going to see if it is strongly arced or if it is straight. And these words can be very subjective, because sometimes straight doesn't always look that way. Kind of nice example here. This is a perfectly straight basal vein. It won't always look like that though. You might have some that might look arced, but they're straight. That's why in these steps you will be following along in your notebook, and this is a couplet that you can star in your book, and you want to kind of backtrack. And so this is one of those examples that will help you out. So this is an example of a straight basal vein, and then this is going to be an example of the arced basal vein. So you can see it it's kind of more vertical right in that part, and then it kind of shoots more that way to the left. And so this is going to be an arced basal vein, and this is going to be a straight basal vein there. And so looking at our example, you can see that it kind of has that more aggressive kind of turn. And so this is going to be a arced basal vein right here. And so now we'll move to the next couplet, and this is going to be couplet 66. This can also be a little subjective or a little difficult. There's a couple ways we can choose our path with this one. You can look at the head, the wing, and the abdomen, whichever kind of they can all help you out, but some might be more helpful than others. And so probably the easiest one to pick for this one is looking at the wing. And so it does usually have a yellow spot, and its clypeus shaped often like a top hat. And then the other option is never with yellow on the clypeus. But if you look on our bee's face, you can see there is some yellow, or it can be a little confused for the clypeus. And so that can be a little difficult to kind of determine. In this step, we'll look at the wing, and it is determining if the second submarginal cell is triangular or if it is more or less square. As you can see, our 3 submarginal cells, it's asking about that second one, and so this one looks more or less square. The triangle one, you can definitely see it in those ones that do have it. And so this is going to be the example of more square. You can actually see for the example of the head, this is what the yellow spot on the clypeus would look like for that bee that it's asking for. And this is a good example of no yellow spot on the clypeus. Those are some examples there. But now we will move on to that next step, couplet 67. This is going to be a little easier. We're going to look at the thorax, and it is asking, is it bright polished green, or it's green but not really bright, and maybe more like a brown or a black. And so we'll look back at our bee, and that is a brilliant green metallic bright color. And so that's going to be that couplet, that first part we'll go through. So now we're going to go to couplet 68, and we're going to look at the abdomen now. This is another one that might ask some kind of steps that could be a little difficult. And so if you don't really know where this part's at, or if it might be too hard to see, you can kind of use all of these to your best ability, whichever kind of helps you out the most. And so in this case, it's asking, is the abdomen yellow and brown striped, or is it just green? We'll look back at our B right here, and we can see that the abdomen is definitely not green. This is the thorax, so the thorax is green, but the abdomen is not green. It's going to be that more black or not black, but yellow and brown striped. And so we are going to go with that couplet. And so now we've finally reached a genus here. And so that is going to be the genus Agapostemon. The SP just stands for that there's not a specific species that we identified it as. And so in your book, if you go to the kind of front page, it shows all of the genera. You can go to that specific page for that genus, and you can actually look at the different species. In this project, we don't need to identify the species, but if you have a very confident, not guess, but a very confident answer that you know is the species or like have pretty good evidence, you can definitely put it, but you do not have to. And if you are a little weary, just don't put it. Just put the Agapostemon and then SP, or the genus and then SP. Now we're going to make our identification label. You will need your B, pen, blue sticky note cutout, and your information of your B as well. I just wrote the identification label, and what you're going to write on it is the genus of the bee. So we got an Agapostemon. Did not put a species, so we'll just put SP period. Then we put the sex symbol right under it. Then you'll put who determined the bee, put DET, and then put your name, and then you're all done making the label. All right, so now when we're done with our identification label, we'll put everything back onto the pin with the bee. We'll put our B now into the ID box, and so it's going from the UPT to the ID box. You'll just put it at the top left area there. And then you are all done.